You know, it's been a while since we've talked about Altergeist. It's been over a month since the last time that I played them. I sort of moved on to different and better decks out there, and pretty much right after I moved on, they won the German Nationals, and I've gotten tons of comments about it. I made a few tweets about it when it happened, but I'll answer it at the start of this video. What do I think about this deck winning the German Nationals? Well, it's not super surprising because, like I said in the past, when this deck opens playable hands, it's almost unstoppable. The things you can do with Altergeist when you open the right ratio of monsters and hand traps and back row is really crazy, so it doesn't surprise me that in the hands of a good player with a good build and a little bit of luck, you can actually win an entire tournament with it. As far as his build went, I loved it. This is doing things that I was doing at YCS Chicago. Both of the tech options that I played at that event are found here, Call by the Grave and Evenly Match in the main deck. Of course, the format has shifted a little bit, but I think Call by the Grave is still a very strong meta choice in Altergeist. When you go first, a lot of the times the Call by the Grave will be used to hit your opponent's Ash Blossom, whether or not that's being used on my Luseek or maybe Extravagance. But I think what made Call by the Grave so good for me at YC Chicago, and also what makes it so good right now, is that you can use it going second to break through some monsters that otherwise would be very difficult to deal with. For example, Call by the Grave is an excellent counter to Ray, and you can also hit Dingirsu when your opponent tries to revive it on your turn. Overall, I think it's an excellent meta choice, and I'm not surprised that it was in his list. Evenly Match is awesome. It's one of the cards that I played at Chicago as well, because when you can evenly match someone and special summon the multi-faker, you just win those games almost every single time. Against decks like Orcus, this card is ridiculously strong right now, because while it is true that Orcus play a counter trap that can negate evenly match, that's not the card that they go for. They go for the field spell, and in that way, they're going to end with some monster cards and some fog blades in the field spell, and you can just hit them with an evenly match, take out all of those cards, and summon a multi-faker. The Orcus deck does have some follow-up, so if you break their board, you still have to have some other good cards to lock down their plays, but we can see through the other cards in this list, like Solemn Strike and Compulsory, which is an awesome tech choice, that he probably didn't have that much trouble actually getting through their follow-up plays. Against Thunder Dragons, the Evenly Match at least baits one negation, which is pretty cool, and this deck isn't really affected by the Thunder Dragon Colossus, so a lot of times you can actually just push through your opponent's board. Anyway though, that's enough about that first place list. I've just been getting a ton of questions about it, so I felt like this was a video that I could answer it in without actually taking away from the overall general discussion. Because in today's video, we're not just talking about this first place German Nationals thing, we're also talking about Altergeist Haunted Rock, and I'll even go a step further and talk about the Tuner and Synchro as well. All three of those cards came out in Dark Neostorm, and every time I open a Dark Neostorm pack, every time that I post an Altergeist profile after Dark Neostorm, I get lots of questions about all three of those cards. Specifically though, I get tons of questions about Haunted Rock and why it isn't seeing a lot of play. Altergeist Haunted Rock is a continuous trap card that was released as a common in Dark Neostorm, and it says if this card was set by the effect of an Altergeist card, you can activate it the turn it was set. Admittedly, if that was the only piece of text that this card had on it, if it had no other effects, this card probably would be pretty decent, but it actually has a downside. So it says when this card is activated, you have to send one Altergeist monster from your hand to the graveyard. That is not optional, you have to do that. When your opponent activates a trap card, except during the damage step, you can send one Altergeist monster from your hand to the graveyard to negate that effect, and if you destroy that card, you can only use each effect of Altergeist Haunted Rock once per turn. Now, admittedly, that second effect is kind of neat against other slower control-based strategies. I can especially see it being good in the mirror match or against decks like Guru Control, but overall, the reason that people are asking questions about Haunted Rock is because you can activate this when you go first and set it off of the Marionetter. And to be completely honest, when you open Marionetter and Multifaker, or even Marionetter and my Luseek, this card is pretty darn good. The problem is that you don't always open those cards, and also whenever you open Marionetter and you're going first and you have Multifaker, that's a broken hand already, even without the Altergeist Haunted Rock. The hands that you lose in Altergeist are the ones where you don't see enough monster cards or you see too many monster cards, and this thing doesn't really help those situations. It makes your good hands better and your bad hands worse. I know that's sort of a cliched statement in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now or for the past couple years, but it really is true with Altergeist Haunted Rock. In Altergeist, you can't really afford any of the cards in your hand to be dead. All of them have to be live, you have to actually be able to activate them, and in the case of Altergeist Haunted Rock, this is probably worse than drawing Gem Knight Garnet, because at least when you drew Gem Knight Garnet, you could use it for a rank 4 monster, you could use it to attack over something, but when you draw this card, it's almost unusable. You still have to discard a card when you activate it, but you can't activate it the turn that it's set. Maybe in a world where this card doesn't have to be specifically set offset by the Marionettor and you can still activate it anytime you draw it, maybe then it's a little bit more playable, but without that, it's really hard to actually find a lot of uses for this card outside of specifically drawing Marionettor and Multifaker, which, as I already explained, is a very good hand to begin with. And trust me, I am very aware of the combos that you can do with Haunted Rock. I can't believe I'm still getting questions to this day or comments to this day from people saying, well, you just don't understand the types of combos you can do if you discard a Multifaker, and especially someone like Marionettor. I think you're talking to the wrong person, because I very well know all of the combos that you can do with this card. They're just not enough to make up for its downsides. Keep in mind that this is a card that you don't want to draw ever. I mean, truly ever. I've played some weird Altergeist tech options in the past. I even played the Altergeist Continuous Trap. It was a trap monster, and while you didn't want to draw that card, at least it wasn't completely unplayable when you drew it, unlike this card where this thing is just total garbage. And unlike when you draw the 1-for-1, if you are doing the Marionettor combo to set the Haunted Rock, you actually don't get to set the Protocol. That's a pretty big deal, because one of the reasons that 1-for-1 is so good is that, yes, if you happen to draw a Multifaker and a Marionettor, you can then pop off and summon a Hextia and set the Protocol. But when you think of Haunted Rock, that's what you're setting instead of Protocol, instead of Manifestation. And I think for a lot of players, summoning the Hextia turn 1 isn't nearly as good as setting a Protocol. And I know that sounds weird, because in the past people have used things like Temple of the Kings and, like I mentioned, 1-for-1 in order to specifically summon Hextia on the first turn. However, in those cases, you were summoning Hextia on the first turn, but also you got to set the Protocol, whereas with the Haunted Rock, unless you hard draw the Protocol, you don't actually end with that very important piece of effect negation. As far as the first turn goes, I actually think that the Protocol in this format is more important in most matchups. Don't get me wrong, Hextia is a very, very powerful card, if not the most powerful card in the Altergeist arsenal for looking at the extra deck, but that doesn't mean that you can summon it all the time and sort of forego setting the Protocol in a format that, to be completely honest, is very monster effect heavy. At the end of the day, Altergeist Haunted Rock is just another archetype card that you would never want to draw, and if you could play it without ever drawing it, maybe you consider it if it just was in some magical deck next to your main deck full of garnets that you only want to use when you specifically have the hand to use them. But the fact of the matter is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't operate like that. Sometimes you're going to draw this card, sometimes you're going to just have Marionettor, sometimes you're not going to have the exact hand that needs this card, and in all of those cases, this card is absolutely terrible. But wait a minute, what about the Synchro monster? What about the Tuner monster? Admittedly, I don't see nearly as many comments about these cards as I do Haunted Rock, but I still see some of them because, yeah, I guess I can see where people think in the optimal situation that the Synchro monster is pretty good. Here's the problem. So the Synchro monster and the Tuner monster, I mean, I think most people see the Tuner monster and realize it's not good for its effect. Its effect is almost completely irrelevant. It's mainly just being used as a Tuner monster, and the Synchro monster does have some cool combos. It does have a combo with Hextia. Protocol, unfortunately, does not tribute cards, so this card will not special summon itself off of the Protocol. Maybe if it did that, it'd be a little bit more worth talking about, but the main problem with these cards as like one entity is their levels. If the Tuner monster was level 3, or if the Synchro monster is level 5, these cards would maybe be worth discussing. The main problem with both of these cards, like I said, just one of them needs to be changed, is that when you summon the Tuner off of Multifaker, you can't immediately make the Synchro monster. If the Tuner was level 3, you could, and if the Synchro was level 5, you could, but as both of them stand right now, you can't do that, which means to summon this thing, you have to have something like an extra Miluseek and then use all 3 monsters, which is a terrible play, or maybe you have to already have a Marionettor on your board, but in that case, you'd probably just rather summon the Miluseek or a Silk instead of the Tuner monster, which does nothing. But more so than that, this card is basically just a win more card in most situations. The times that you're able to summon this thing under a Hextia and also have access to your normal combo cards are the times that you're already winning the game. In Altergeist, if you can summon 1 Hextia, most of the time you can summon 2 Hextias and get the full combo out. The full combo that I'm referring to is basically how you win with Altergeist. It has 2 Hexias on the board, it has a Protocol set, and then it has a Multifaker in hand, and in that situation, you've already won that game. You don't need this small incremental value card to actually help out that board setup. There aren't really any cases where you'd rather summon this thing over the second copy of Hexia, and even in those weird situations where you banish the Hexias off of Extravagance, you'd you'd probably rather have access to the other Altergeist Link monsters just because they're a little bit less linear in terms of how you can actually summon them. Actually, the fact that Extravagance exists and is played in Altergeist is yet another reason to not play this card. Are you really going to play more than one copy of this thing in your extra deck when there's so many other better extra deck monsters out there? You probably aren't going to go into those other extra deck monsters that often, but I don't even think that that's enough of a reason to play this card over those other tech options. For Altergeist to be good again, they don't really need weird tech options, even if they're Altergeist cards that only come up in specific combos. They need as many consistency boosting cards as possible, as well as a bunch of high impact traps. That's what we saw out of the first place German national list, and that's what we'll see out of any future topping or winning Altergeist deck list. I'm not saying these cards are completely unplayable. They certainly have their uses in whatever hands you can actually make use of them are, but a lot of times you just don't need these cards to have a comboing hand. You don't really need to play these bad garnets just in case you draw those specifically good openings, because if you draw those openings, you're probably winning those games anyway. That being said, that's going to wrap up today's video. I've been getting a ton of comments from people asking about my reactions to the first place deck list and also why I don't think Haunted Rock is very good. I figured it'd be a really good idea to just combine both of those ideas into one video so I can answer all of those questions at one single time. I'll see you guys later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.